In fact, I'd like to present to you a man who wisened the world up about what the blues is all about.
Big Joe Turner did not just help birth rock and roll. He was rock and roll before the genre even had a name. But while his sound blazed through smoky bars and back alley clubs, it was white America that cashed in. Decades before conversations about cultural appropriation went mainstream, Turner lived through it. This is the story of how his voice shook the world, but built empires for others. The song that made millions, just not for Big Joe Turner. It should have been his moment. In 1954, Big Joe Turner recorded Shake, Rattle, and Roll, a loud, gritty, joyfully rebellious anthem. His voice was thunder. His rhythm was pure S and swing. It was black music at its most alive. But America did not hear it that way. Just months after Turner's version dropped, a clean-cut white group called Bill Haley and his Comets released their own version of the same song. The beat was tamer. The lyrics were sanitized. The soul was stripped out, but the money came flooding in.
Rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock, we're gonna rock.
Haley's version became a nationwide sensation. It was played on white radio. It soared up the charts. It helped define what would soon be labeled rock and roll. But the man who started the fire, Big Joe Turner, he was left in the shadows. This was not a fluke. It was a blueprint. Time and time again, white performers repackaged the raw sound of black pioneers and sold it to mainstream America, while the originators were sidelined, censored, and underpaid. Shake, Rattle, and Roll should have been Turner's ticket to stardom. Instead, it became Exhibit A in the long history of musical theft, how black artists created the sound and white performers took the spotlight. And that was just the beginning. Segregated stages, separate checks. Big Joe Turner had a voice that could crack ceilings, but in Jim Crow America, even that voice could not break through the walls of segregation. In the 1940s and 50s, Turner was already a heavyweight on the black music circuit. He was a star at the Cotton Club, the Apollo, the Chitlin Circuit, but he was not allowed in the front doors of many white-only venues, let alone headline them. He did perform for segregated crowds, white folks in front, black folks in back, or worse, black fans denied entry altogether. In some clubs, he could sing on stage but not eat at the restaurant. He was good enough to entertain, but not equal enough to sit. Touring was no better. Turner and other black artists faced constant humiliation, refused service at hotels, forced to sleep in their cars, barred from using public restrooms. And while his records were hot in black communities, white radio stations would not touch him. Mainstream America was not ready for that much soul, that much grit. They wanted the sound, just not from someone who looked like Big Joe Turner. So when white singers like Bill Haley or Elvis Presley copied his music, the doors flew open. Suddenly, the same rhythms that had been too dangerous from Turner were now safe, exciting, and profitable in white hands. Turner was stuck in a racial double-bind. He was the innovator, the influence, the engine. But the industry treated him like background noise. And the money? That followed the whiteness. While Haley's version of Shake, Rattle, and Roll raced up the Billboard charts, Turner's original was kept out of white households. The lyrics were deemed too S, the voice too raw. But the censored version? That could be played anywhere, even in the suburbs. The reality was brutal. Turner created the meal, but someone else sat at the table. The covers that erased him. In 1954, Big Joe Turner released Shake, Rattle, and Roll, a bold, raunchy anthem filled with swagger, soul, and the gritty flavor of black nightlife. It was not just a hit, it was a warning shot. Rock and roll was not born in the suburbs. It came screaming out of the clubs, sweaty and unapologetic. But just weeks after Turner's version dropped, a clean-cut white bandleader named Bill Haley released his own version, with the suggestive lyrics scrubbed clean, the rhythm smoothed out, and all the danger removed. Haley's version got radio play nationwide. It shot up the white-dominated charts. It was promoted on TV. It made rock and roll safe for white America. And suddenly, Big Joe Turner was a footnote in his own revolution. This was not just a remix, it was a takeover. Turner's Shake, Rattle, and Roll had lines like, "You wear those dresses, the sun comes shining through." But Haley's sanitized version ditched that for tamer lines. And where Turner's voice growled and roared, Haley's sounded like he was smiling through a sock hop. Critics called it progress. The industry called it genius. But black artists called it what it was: theft. And this was not a one-time thing. Turner was not alone. Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, all watched as their sounds were cleaned up, repackaged, and sold to white audiences by white faces. This was not about flattery. It was about profit and gatekeeping. Because for every black pioneer who created a sound, there was a white performer waiting to capitalize on it, with the full power of white-run record labels, TV networks, and magazines behind them. And the worst part? Most of white America never even knew Big Joe Turner existed. They thought Haley invented rock and roll. Big Joe Turner's uncredited legacy? While Elvis was being crowned the king of rock and roll, and Bill Haley's face was plastered across jukeboxes, Big Joe Turner was performing in dark clubs, getting pennies for the sound he helped create. In fact, Turner never stopped performing. He kept grinding, night after night, in jazz joints and R&B bars, belting out songs for crowds that remembered the truth, even if the record books didn't. He would smile through it. He'd joke about it. But behind that big, booming voice was a man who knew. They danced to my music, but forgot my name. Radio stations played the cover versions. Music historians skipped over his name, and mainstream audiences never got to see the man behind the sound. Meanwhile, younger white rockers were hailed as pioneers. They were called rebels, innovators, when in reality they were students of Turner's gospel. His voice gave birth to a movement, but the baby was raised by someone else. Even into the late 70s and early 80s, Big Joe Turner was still performing. He was older, slower, sometimes even unrecognized by the crowds he entertained. But the power, the voice, still thunder. Some blues historians tried to correct the record. Some black artists like Ray Charles and B.B. King paid homage. But the industry, it never paid the debt. Turner passed away in 1985. No national tribute, no Grammy performance, no Rock Hall of Fame induction broadcast, just silence. But if you listen closely, in the roar of every rock ballad, in the shuffle of every blues riff, in the fire of every rebel song, that's Big Joe Turner's voice, echoing through time, uncredited, unpaid, unbothered. Because legends, they don't need headlines, they leave ripples. Censorship of lyrics, silencing the soul of Big Joe Turner. In the gritty heart of rhythm and blues, Big Joe Turner's voice was not just loud, it was dangerous. Not because it incited violence or rebellion, but because it was real, raw, unapologetically black. And for white America in the 1950s, that kind of honesty needed to be tamed. One of Turner's most iconic hits, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, was a full-throttle anthem drenched in innuendo. Lines like, "I'm like a one-eyed cat peeping in a seafood store," weren't just clever. They were bold statements of confidence, urban swagger, and cultural rhythm. But when white audiences started catching wind of it, the music industry got nervous. That's when censorship came in like a scalpel, slicing the soul out of black music. When Bill Haley and his Comets covered Shake, Rattle, and Roll, they did not just sing it, they rewrote it. The rhythm stayed, but the fire was gone. The suggestive lyrics were replaced with safe suburban versions like, "Get out of that bed, wash your face and hands." Gone was the steamy grit of Turner's version. Gone was the cultural flavor of a black man expressing the everyday passion of working-class life. In its place was a clean-cut rock and roll jingle made fit for radio and profit. But this was not just about one song. It was a pattern. Throughout the 40s and 50s, black artists constantly found their music watered down, rewritten, or outright banned. Stations refused to play Turner's original versions, labeling them too risque, even as those same stations happily played the neutered white covers. The rules were clear. If a black man had something bold to say, America did not want to hear it unless a white man said it for him. This censorship was part of a broader cultural theft. White America wanted the sound but not the soul. Big Joe's music was rooted in juke joints, bar rooms, and real lived experience. It was not supposed to be clean, it was supposed to be honest. And that honesty terrified the gatekeepers of American radio. Because to let a black man speak unfiltered on national airwaves, that was revolution. And yet, white artists were celebrated for singing the exact same lyrics black artists were punished for. Elvis could swing his hips and flirt with danger. But Turner? He had to watch his tone. So while America danced to a stolen rhythm, Big Joe Turner watched from the sidelines, his voice echoing through a system that copied it, cleaned it, and cashed in on it. By the time mainstream audiences even realized there was an original version of Shake, Rattle, and Roll, the money had already changed hands, and the story had already been rewritten. Joe's legacy was censored, his lyrics diluted, his voice borrowed, but his impact unshakable. Big Joe Turner walked so rock could run. When people talk about the birth of rock and roll, names like Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Little Richard get thrown around like royalty. But dig just a little deeper, and you'll find Big Joe Turner at the foundation, hammering the rhythm, shaping the attitude, and setting the blueprint before rock had a name.
Rock. In fact, I'd like to present to you a man who wisened the world up about what the blues is all about.
Turner was not just part of the story, he was the spark. Before Elvis ever slid across a stage or Bill Haley plucked a chord, Joe was tearing up stages in Kansas City with nothing but a booming voice and the pulse of the blues behind him. But here's the twist. While rock and roll was becoming a multi-million-dollar industry, Big Joe was being pushed out of his own revolution. The music that he helped create was being rebranded and repackaged, with white faces front and center, while the originators were left behind. Even Bill Haley's career, the man often wrongly credited with popularizing Shake, Rattle, and Roll, was built directly on Turner's style. Same tempo, same phrasing, just a different voice, a different color. It was not just imitation, it was erasure with a smile. And yet Joe Turner never stopped. He kept recording, kept touring, kept singing songs that bled truth into every bar. He knew that while the spotlight might miss him, the real ones knew who lit the fuse. Because truthfully, Big Joe Turner was too big for just one genre. He was not blues, he was not jazz, he was not just rock, he was the bridge. The voice that carried the pain of slavery, the fire of gospel, the flirt of swing, and the rage of rebellion, all in one gravel-lined, soul-soaked sound. Today, when we hear those classic rock riffs or watch leather-jacketed rebels shred on stage, we're still hearing echoes of Joe. He may not have had the record deals or the TV spots, but the music industry still moves to his rhythm. Big Joe Turner walked so Elvis could run, so Little Richard could scream, so the world could wake up to a sound that was always black, always bold, and always unstoppable. The names we just spoke, Big Joe Turner, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Jimmy Rogers, Ruth Brown, and more, weren't side characters in music history. They were the originators, the blueprint, the soul and structure behind the house we now call rock and roll. But while their sound traveled the globe, their names faded into footnotes, their legacies outsold, outshined, and overwritten. This was not just a case of being overlooked. It was intentional. They were silenced, underpaid, and creatively erased, while others collected awards off the backs of their genius. And still, they kept creating, kept performing, kept showing up with voices that cracked ceilings and lyrics that bled truth. So the next time you hear a guitar riff that makes your heart race, or a soul note that shakes your spine, remember, someone paid the price for that sound to exist. Someone you may have never heard of, but now you have. And it's time the world hears them too.